Show Healthy Living interview series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you and welcome to the Not Old Better Show Healthy Living series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang. Today we are talking about story, spirit, betrayal, friendship, and the search for something steady when life throws us off balance. You'll love the title for today's episode, When the Guru Falls, Meryl Davids Landau on Yoga Bind, Betrayal, and the Courage to Begin Again. Of course, my guest is the award-winning author, independent health journalist, certified yoga teacher, and returning fan favorite to the show, novelist Meryl Davids Landau. Meryl is the author of what she calls mindful women's novels. It's a great category. It's unique to her. It's amazing. The books that she's written include Downward Dog, Upward Fog, the award-winning Warrior One is spelled W-O-N, and now her third novel, Yoga Bind. This new book brings us back into a circle of spirituality-seeking women, but this time the ground underneath them shifts. Janelle, the central character, is moving right along her spiritual path when a serious accusation against her revered yoga guru forces her to ask a painful question. If the teacher is tainted, are the teachings tainted too? It's a great question, and Meryl Davids Landau is here to answer that powerful question. But it's not only about yoga, it's about trust. As we get older, trust is crucial. It's about community, also important to us as we get older. It's about how we hold complexity when someone we admire disappoints us, or worse. And for many of us, especially as we grow older, it's about how we keep growing without becoming cynical. Meryl Davids Landau, welcome back to the Not Old Better Show. Meryl Davids Landau, welcome back to the program.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's so nice to talk to you. Happy Friday afternoon. This is a great time for us to talk. It's especially good because we're going to talk about your new book. And I just think, this work that you do with regard to mindfulness and yoga women's novels, it's very unique. It's a very specific lane that you've created. And I know you well enough to know that you just had to build this yourself. And so we are going to have fun, I think, talking about all of your work. But Yoga Bind is the newest book, and I'm interested in just kind of
coming out June 9th.
June 9th. Mm-hmm. We will have links so that our audience can find out more information about you, about the book, and all of your work. But congratulations on the third third in this series.
Thank you. Yes. Well, they're not. I call it a collection as opposed to a
Good.
Series because they are each standalone books.
Yeah. Yeah, and I again, we've talked previously. You certainly are an audience favorite. I really think this is an interesting subject, and I know enough about you, and in my research, I found too that you wanted to write fiction for people who were interested in this subject of mindfulness, but they didn't necessarily want a big, dense spiritual textbook. And so I think my first question really for you is about that. What was it that fiction allowed you to say about the subject of mindfulness that a straight health article or just this dense spiritual guide couldn't get across?
Well, as you know, I am a huge personal fan of mindfulness, yoga, meditation. I try to practice those things in my life, sometimes more regularly than others. But I think it's especially important in this environment. How do you keep your inner peace? And so it was years ago, before my first novel, that I kind of looked at my bookshelf in my house and saw I had a huge array of spiritual mindfulness, yoga nonfiction books, which were very popular, especially, 10 years ago. And then I had a huge array of women's fiction because I just love reading fiction at the beach, at the pool, when you want to relax at the end of the day. And I just thought to myself, where is the novel that combines those two things together? Where is the novel that takes these concepts or philosophies and doesn't just like try to jam it down a person's throat, but makes it fun and an interesting read? And so I started my first book, and my other books kind of continue that theme of how do you keep your inner peace no matter what's going on in your life, but told through the life of my main character, Janelle. And writing fiction is just so fun. Like, as you know, I write nonfiction. I write magazine articles, mostly about health, where every fact has to be exact. And so I really like writing fiction and just creating stories out of whole cloth.
Yeah, and Janelle really exists in the world. You think about spiritual novels, you think about mindfulness as a subject, and perhaps some in my audience might think, okay, this is taking place on a serene mountaintop somewhere.
Right.
Well,
Right.
Janelle has a job, there's family drama involved, relationship stress, all of this stuff. And she learns. We'll talk a little bit about the book and get your senses to kind of this idea of the spiritual path, because Janelle learns something kind of disturbing about her teacher, her guru. And I think the thing that struck me and interested me about that knowledge and what Janelle learns is it wasn't simply about, did this happen? It really becomes in the story, what does this mean about everything I believed? And so when Janelle hears this accusation about her teacher, about her guru, what is it that breaks inside her first? Is it her faith in the guru and the teacher? Is it her faith in the teachings of the guru? Or is it her faith in her own judgment about this person?
And I'm going to say all of the above,
Okay.
because I think when something happens that really rocks your foundation, you
Mhm.
question everything, right?
Mhm.
So she questions the teacher that she looked up to and she admired. And a lot of us have that in the world, right? Someone we looked up to who turns out not to be what we hoped the person would be. But also these teachings that she has kind of directed her life by, the importance of mindfulness, staying in the present moment, trying to keep your mind from jumping to what ifs and future fears and all the things that all of us regularly do all of the time. And these spiritual teachings are really designed to help, people learn how to us learn how to control that. So, in the novel, she asks herself if a teacher is tainted, are his teachings tainted too? And I think that that's, again, a question a lot of us ask when something happens in the world to someone that we admire or follow. And so that's why throughout most of the book, she doesn't want to believe it, even though a lot of the evidence points to the fact that it probably happened. And the other thing the other loss that, or thing that she questions is her community and her friends, right? Because her friends are tied to that world. And so if she has to leave that world and those teachings, does she also have to leave her good friends who are really very important to her? So it's kind of all of those things together that really rock her right from the beginning of the book. And then the whole rest of the book is her trying to figure out how to find her footing. And I like what you said before about that she doesn't go on a journey, because so many spiritual books are people are going on a quest, right? They're leaving their regular life to go find themselves spiritually. But I have always been very clear that spirituality has to happen right where you are in your regular life, in your workplace, in your family life, in your community, in your day to day. And so, my goal with all of my novels has always been her regular life. She's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and in the very place that gives her the most calm is where she and the community experiences the most shaken and really the most the issues that really lead to kind of the rest of the book. So tell us a little bit about what Janelle goes through to kind of control her mind and her body as a result of some of this.
Right. So there are a lot of spiritual
Hmm.
practices or mindfulness practices that are kind of sprinkled throughout the
Hmm.
book. Again, in a fun
Hmm.
way. She and her friend Lorna, who Lorna was the main character in my prior two novels. So Janelle is her friend. She's the main character in this novel. And she and Lorna have read a lot of books and tried a lot of things. And so she uses a lot of those throughout the novel. And I think that, part of the fun for me is having readers learn about and explore some of these processes. For me, probably the most important or the most valuable one that I use personally, that I have Janelle use quite a bit, that anybody listening can equally use, is any time in the day for 30 seconds or a minute, just to really focus on a part of your body that's touching some kind of object outside. So I call that the inner outer pause, just kind of a name that Janelle made up. But it's like you're putting your hands on your keyboard. It's like just feel your fingertips touching the keyboard. That brings you into the moment in such a profound way in such a quick amount of time. If you're sitting on a chair, just feel your back against the back of the chair or your feet against the floor. And you only have to do that for a couple of seconds to really feel yourself being pulled into the present moment. And I think all of mindfulness is really just about bringing your thoughts into what's happening right here and now, which remarkably studies have shown we spend very little time actually doing in our day. Most of the time, our mind is fast forwarding into things we need to do or what might happen if, or things we should have said or done or in the past. And so all these practices designed to kind of bring you in the moment, I think are so valuable to me, to anyone, and especially to Janelle as she's going through this crisis in the novel.
Yeah, I think that's something that is just so fresh about the book, too, because you present mindfulness as something that is tested through some of these practices. And you talk about EFT tapping and energy work and kind of this radical acceptance. How did you decide about using some of those kind of practices on behalf of Janelle?
I wish I could say I did an extensive amount of research on all the practices in the world, but really I said, what do I love?
Yeah.
I think tapping is fun. It's a practice
Uh-huh.
where you touch different energy points on the body. You work really on mostly on the face and the upper body and a little bit on the hand, and it's supposed to release energy, stuck energy. I'm not sure whether it does that or not, but for me, again, it's just another way to get mindfully in the present moment. Um, I had read a book a number of years ago on chakra energy practices, specifically for women. That plays a key role in the novel as well. So it was something that I just kind of stumbled upon that I really loved. Um, um, and then the inner outer pause again, yoga, which, yoga obviously plays a huge role in all of these novels, which some people think of yoga as exercise. I've always loved to do very slow and mindful yoga poses because, again, it's a way to really make yourself present, focusing on your body, focusing on what's happening in that moment. So these are just practices that I love and that I think are easy, that anyone could really pick up and do. Uh, if they read the book and they're inspired to do that, um, that's why I kind of have her do a lot of different type of mindfulness practices instead of just one, like throughout the whole book. She kind of is introducing a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you introduced too is this idea of the workplace as perhaps a place of spiritual testing, because Janelle has some challenges in the workplace. And a lot of books that I researched in anticipation of our conversation about mindfulness, about this idea of spiritual growth, they keep the conflict in the yoga studio. But you've really kind of opened it up to these values that we share once we go to work, and we're all working in some way or another, and that's where ego shows up. That's where power can become pretty complicated. Why was it important for you in the book to show Janelle's workplace and the issues that are associated with that alongside her spiritual crisis?
Right. And she has a second spiritual crisis involving the workplace. And I kind of wanted to do that because, life is never so clean as it is in many novels where you have one crisis and then it gets resolved, and then you have another crisis and then it gets resolved. Often life piles one thing on top of the other. And so here she's going through this major crisis about her guru, whether or not he did what he's accused of and what that means for her. And then something happens at work that she also has to deal with kind of at the same time and work through. So I like that idea, but also work. Obviously, we spend so many hours a day in the office, right? So if you're going to compartmentalize your life, I'm going to be spiritual after work when I go to my yoga class, and I'm going to be spiritual in the morning when I wake up and do my half hour of mindfulness. You're missing so much of the day when mindfulness is such an important element and can make you successful or not successful at work, right? If you can keep yourself calm at work, you can be a lot more productive and get along better with other people. So that was the main reason why she focused on work, but also just life is 24 hours a day. How do you control your mind during all those 24 hours? So she and her friend Lorna have a little running gag where they answer the phone. They say, yoga mission field, because they're trying to remind each other that yoga doesn't just happen in a class on the mat when you're doing the poses. Yoga is a philosophy that you take with you throughout the whole day. And work is such a huge part of that.
Meryl Davids Landau, we're going to take a pause right here because we've been talking about crisis, the fall of a teacher, the shock to a community, and Janelle's attempt to regain her footing. But there's another layer in Yoga Bind that broadens the story beautifully. This is not only about what Janelle believes right now, it's about what came before her: family, ancestry, heritage, and the stories that travel through generations, even when nobody is speaking them out loud. This is just a great, great next half. Please stay tuned. We're going to turn to the yoga studio and the workplace, to something even deeper, the roots underneath Janelle's life. We'll be right back with author Meryl Davids Landau, talking about her new book, Yoga Bind. It's out now. Check it out. Our guest, of course, is Meryl Davids Landau, author of the new book, Yoga Bind. Also has written Downward Dog, Upward Fog, and Warrior One. Warrior One is spelled W-O-N. We'll put links so that our audience can find out more information about Meryl Davids Landau, all of her books, including this wonderful new book, Yoga Bind, that we're spending some time talking about today. Let's talk a little bit about heritage, Meryl. I think that's an interesting element in the book, too. And it has to do with one of her relatives. It comes up as a result of her cousin, Danny, who arrives on the scene. And there's a pull, a tug towards some family values and her Jewish roots. And I thought that was really an interesting, kind of element in the story, because we're talking about ancestry now. It's a little bit of a backward look. And so I think some might have a complicated relationship with religion or heritage. What is it that...
Quite a few people, yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Janelle's ideas about belonging.
Right. So I wanted somebody from her family to come and visit. So Janelle lives in New York. She's this, modern woman living in the Big Apple. And so her cousin, who lives in a more rural part of the world, comes to visit for the summer. That also gives Janelle an opportunity to kind of see New York again through the fresh eyes of someone who's never been there before. But Danny also is more religious, Jewish than Janelle is. Janelle really has no religion, but culturally and from a heritage perspective, she's Jewish. And I do think where we came from and how we integrate that into ourselves is an important part of emotional growth and knowing who we are and being able to move forward in a healthier way. And so I thought it was important to kind of explore not just her Jewish roots, and that she kind of comes to terms with the Judaism aspect that she had really abandoned before, but also just the notion that understanding people you never thought of before, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, going all the way back, they really help to make us who we are. And I think it's fun sometimes to just really think about that. So in the book, the cousin brings a letter that she discovered in her parents' attic. And so the letter is written in 1914, right before World War I, from her relatives that were in Europe at the time. And so for me, I actually I have a cousin who was interested in genealogy, and so she pointed me to a website where she had done kind of the family tree. And there was a version of this letter. Obviously, I took a lot of fiction liberties, but there was a version of a letter written in 1914 from one of my relatives right after the Archduke Ferdinand is shot, but before all of the countries go to war. That's when this letter was written, and that's when I said it in the novel as well. So to me, that was a really interesting thing for Janelle to just really think about kind of the same things that I thought about when this letter appeared in my real life, which is like, we are so much more connected and defined by the people who came before us than we tend to acknowledge in our life. And so that's part of being mindful as well, being mindful of our heritage and our history and how that has shaped us. So that was kind of fun to include in the book. And also, even though Janelle kind of rejects Judaism in its traditional form, the notion that every place can provide spiritual growth is something that she also comes to realize in the book. And I think that that's, again, an important thing that I believe and that I wanted to kind of express in a novel.
I thought it was fascinating that as Janelle is looking back, she also begins to look at the circle of friends around her from a spiritual perspective. And that really adds an interesting element, I thought, too, to Janelle's journey in this.
Yeah. So for me, girlfriends have always played a large role in all of my novels because, so many novels are based on, a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
The woman finds the man and her life is complete. But, there may or may not be a man in this book, but the girlfriends are really the key support. And that's why, again, when she questions, do I have to leave this guru and everything he represents? Do I also have to leave my girlfriends? What if they don't leave the guru? Then I really have to leave my girlfriends. Um, that's such a big struggle for her because the friends are such an important part of your life. And I think community, again, whether it's friends or whether it's a religious community or some other community is so important to our personal growth that was an aspect that I felt was really crucial for this novel and for all of my other novels as well. And especially when something happens, right? I mean, anybody in the yoga world knows how many gurus have been accused of these things. Catholic priests obviously have been accused of these things. So in any kind of spiritual endeavor, it's very often people find that they've been betrayed, and the friends are people that you lean on. You need them, and she struggles with that because even though she needs them, they're also tainted um, by this whole community that she's wondering if she has to reject.
You also touch on ideas of forgiveness, and I thought that was very special. That Janelle really comes to kind of terms with that, not so much as this kind of perfect ideal forgiveness, but it's a little messy, in fact, and it might even be a little unfinished. What is it that Janelle learns about this idea of forgiveness that really is kind of propels her a bit?
So forgiveness is very messy for most of us. And we struggle with whether to do it, whether it's right to do it, whether we should do it, how to do it. In the yoga world, there's a thing called a spiritual bypass, which is when people just try to bypass all their emotions of anger and everything else and get to this kind of false forgiveness. So, that was part of what I wanted to explore. But eventually, forgiveness, it's something that we do for ourselves. It, we may think that we need to forgive that person because, or that we should forgive that person to be a good person for them. But when you carry around all that anger and bitterness and rehash in your mind over and over all the wrongs that this person did to you, that's so unhelpful to us. And so, I have Janelle thinks about her grandmother a lot in this novel, in Nana. And she remembers that Nana says, "Forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." And I think too often we let that forgiveness, that anger make us bitter and we lose our inner peace. Whereas if you would just shed the violet on the heel, you could just move on and not be so angered about it. And like we said, it can be hard. And you think there are some people who can't be forgiven. There are some acts that can't be forgiven. But this is where years ago, when I was doing a magazine article, I interviewed Scarlett Lewis, who's the mother of a kindergartner, Jesse Lewis, who was killed at Sandy Hook. He was, 5, 6 years old. And she made it her mission to figure out how to forgive the person who had done that and to really try to understand what might have make him do it so that she could move on. She's actually mentioned in the book because she's in a book that one of the characters reads. But I remember she told me, like, being able to forgive this person really set her free. And she's created a whole organization kind of around the importance of that. So that really stuck with me, that you have to work through your emotions. And I'm not saying forgiveness means you let people back into your life who do things that where they should not be in your life. But if you can learn to kind of get through the emotions to the point where you can forgive them and kind of release it, that's so valuable for us, for our personal growth, for our emotional growth, and for our inner peace, which again is, for me, that inner peace is just such an important goal to strive for as much as we can throughout our day and throughout our lives.
So, for those who are familiar with your work, A Downward Dog, Upward Fog, Warrior One, and now Yoga Bind, what would you say to a reader that just wants to step in and pick up Yoga Bind? Is it particularly important to have read the previous books that you mentioned right at the top of the show? This is a series, so much there's some character overlap, perhaps, but
Right.
what would you tell us?
Right. Yeah, I call it a
Uh-huh.
collection. I call it a collection instead of a series because the books do all have that genre, which I kind of
Yep.
created, called
Congratulations.
mindfulness yoga women's fiction. It doesn't really exist out in the world, but all these books really are that. And so they feature some similar characters and you know eh, similar locations, but each book stands on its own. You could pick up any of them kind of in any order, and especially Yoga Bind, I think, for all writers, the longer you write, the better you get. So I do think Yoga Bind is probably my best work as from a writing perspective. So if a person just wanted to pick up that one, they certainly could. If they picked up that one and then wanted to go back and read more backstory, they could go back and read Downward Dog, Upward Fog after that, and Warrior One after that. But you could really pick up any of the books in any order, and they do definitely stand on their own.
And congratulations again on all of this work. The books are wonderful. We're talking to Meryl Davids Landau about Yoga Bide today. And I want to ask you kind of a final wrap-up question for somebody listening today who may have drifted away from their yoga practice. They may no longer be practicing
Or
meditation
never did.
or journaling
Or never did.
or never did. Yeah.
You can read these books even if you never did, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not only for the
And
faith.
so what's the goal
Yeah.
of, I mean, yeah, and so there's a spirituality about you and certainly about these books. Is there a goal that you have for getting people to kind of reacquaint themselves with some of these practices?
I mean, I think that it's not required. You can just read the book to have a fun kind of beach read. I always picture readers of Yoga Bind, sitting around the pool,
Yeah.
enjoying a light read, because even though it is a kind of a heavy topic, did her guru betray her, and how does she kind of emotionally come to terms with that? Publishers Weekly said it was a breezy enjoyment, and I loved that because that's so important. That's like one of my crucial goals, is to make the reading fun. But
Yeah.
when somebody contacts me afterwards and says, your books got me back into my practice of yoga, or I explored something that I never knew before, um, uh, I feel like I've grown emotionally, or figured out that inner peace, or for friendship or forgiveness are such important things. in their own life, that's certainly a win for me, because I hope that some element of the book inspires a person's personal life in a way that they feel is good for them. But again, the number one thing is enjoyable read, and I think Yoga Bind, um, as my most recent book, having learned fiction writing craft over the years, I do think it is definitely kind of a fun beach read. So at the end of the book, though, I did put a list of because Janelle is a big reader. She reads a lot of the nonfiction books, like we talked about the EFT, we talked about the chakra empowerments for women. These are books that Janelle reads. And after my first book, I heard um, from a lot of fans saying, I wish there was a place where you, like, a resource list. So this is fiction, so I don't know if I should have a resource list, but I decided to do that. So at the end of Yoga Bind, there is a list of the books that inspired Janelle, so that if anybody is inspired when they read the book to explore those further, they have a resource to do that. So I think that's kind of fun too. Like, if you want to mix the fiction with the nonfiction, again, which is my world, I love reading both of those. Then I think that the books that are offered at the end of the novel give people a place to think about those.
Meryl Davids Landau, thank you so much for joining us today. Your new novel, Yoga Bind, gives readers a story about spiritual searching, but also about discernment, about this idea of complexity. How we keep our hearts open without handing over our judgment. How we stay connected to community without ignoring harm. And how the past may still have something to teach us. For our listeners in the Not Old Better show, especially those of us thinking about purpose, thinking about resilience, and thinking about growth in the second half of life, this conversation is a reminder. Mindfulness is not only about feeling calm. Sometimes it's about having the courage to see clearly. Meryl Davids Landau, thank you so much again for joining us on the Not Old Better Show Art of Living interview series. Your new book, Yoga Bind, is wonderful. Thanks for sharing it with me. As I mentioned, we will have links to all of Meryl Davids Landau's work, her great health journalism, as well as her new book, Yoga Bind. So please check it out. You're going to just love this book. It's so uplifting. And now to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Share this episode with someone who loves thoughtful fiction, spiritual questions, or a good conversation about how we keep growing at any age. Until next time, I'm Paul Vogelsang. Be well, stay curious. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better show. Keep asking the questions that matter. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.